So hello everyone. We don't know what we're doing, but actually we're just kind of having fun today, all day long. We had a great time with Peter today in Barcelona, in IESE Business School, where they are having the symposium for coaching all day long. And Peter has been working very hard. Keynote speech in the morning, a workshop in the afternoon, and now with us. And I also see Eve, who is also joining us from all the way other side of Europe. We are Europe, but what's
across the Bay of Biscay.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be talking about, we don't know what we're going to talk about, but it will be kind of lovely afternoon conversation about how we see things going on in the coaching world, in the world in general, maybe beyond. So basically, this is a new format. As you see, this is a kind of, there's no screen sharing here. We are actually in the same room. And first time I'm using Zoom in that manner. Have you tried Zoom like that in the room?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So that's a first for me. So today, let's start with today, because as we are broadcasting from IESE, unfortunately nobody from IESE with us now. They are busy with the workshop now, but it's the balance and all the team, they are sending their best regards. And they did a great job, isn't it?
Great job. We've got coaches here from across Asia, across South America, across Africa, across Europe. So a really international group with the theme being how do we create effective leadership teams? And how do we build from that? We were going on to how do we build WeQ, collaborative intelligence? And how do we have teams that aren't just focused on relating well to each other, but teams that are focused on how they co-create value with and for all their stakeholders. And we will come on to that with the work that Eve and I have been doing with Josie McLean and our dear friend who died, Alison Wybrow, around how do we partner with the ecology and see the ecology as a really important stakeholder for every individual coaching and every team coaching. And not only a stakeholder, but a partner in the process, a partner in the coaching group.
Maybe before we move on, if you can share the screen and we can just see the book very straight on. So let's start with what you want to say at the end, right. Because it will say it all. Because I'm going to work on the name of the book.
Okay, so there's the book. It came out 3 days ago, and if you do want to take a picture of it, you can see that there's a discount code that only works in November and only works on Routledge websites. If you try to use it on Amazon, it won't recognize it. I think if you're just even a little bit interested, then do join the Climate Coaching Alliance, but particularly come to events that Peter, Josie and I are running on the 29th of November, but with contributors and with members of Ali, the late Ali Wybrow's family. And then finally, just to say the royalties with a match donation, that means the money that the authors would have got with a match donation is going to an ecological charity. So there you are, that's the book. Sadly, Peter hasn't got a copy with him. I haven't got a copy yet, but everyone else I know has got a copy, just not us. So sorry to have to show you a slide.
And the launch we're doing is slightly different. Riza's coming to the launch.
Yeah, sure, online. Yeah.
Online.
Yeah.
But it's an online launch, and the idea is to give you a taste of the book, not just talk about it, but a journey through, because the book follows what somebody would know about and can read about on the Climate Coaching Alliance website, the eco-phase model. What's the work we have to do as coaches and team coaches to be able to work in partnership with the more than human world?
We're going to talk about the book, but before we start, I think a key word there for me is conscious. I need your kind of opinion on that, because there's this kind of argument that coaching is non-directive, non-judgmental. And now being conscious what do we really mean? Like, the coach's role is to create clarity for the client, for the coachee. Good enough, fair enough. But now we're talking about being conscious. And of course, the book highlights one topic, which is very important, to be conscious. And one can argue that there are many other topics, very important topics, that the coaches should be conscious. So how come you chose this word in the
You see, you'll know from today, Riza, that I would argue that leaders, coaches, team coaches, consultants, we are all fundamentally in the business of helping evolve human consciousness, right? And that is an aspect of every coaching relationship. If you go back to Einstein's quote, you can't solve a problem with the consciousness and the mindset that created it. Our job is always to help the team, the individual, the leader, whoever we're working with, shift the perception through which they're seeing the issue. Now, we don't do that by telling, we don't do that by showing, we do that by inviting into the room different perspectives. Yeah. So to give an example, colleague I mentioned today was working with a very senior group of engineers. And they were all stuck in their left hemisphere, analytic problems. And what they did, these two coaches in Canada, they got them to step into the role of their current or future grandchildren and talk about what their grandparent was doing. And suddenly, these hard-bitten, locked-in engineers were in tears. And they said, look, I've worked with these people 20 years, and I have heard more, I've heard more about what matters to them in the last hour than I have in the 20 years I've worked with them. Now, that's not us being directive, that's us bringing in a perspective shift, either in time, taking them, think 20 years back, or step into the shoes of the stakeholder. Let's have a seat in the boardroom for the customer, the investor, the employee, but let's also have one for future grandchildren. Let's have a seat in the room for the ecology, and get the non-execs out of their chairs and sitting in the other perspective. That's what we do as coaches. We help people get out of the prison of their current way of thinking. We don't change the problem out there. We shift the eyes through which we're looking at it.
It's actually all about whose voice are we missing in the room, in the system, how to bring them into dialogue, isn't it? And one more thing, just one more thing I like to really touch, because it was really touching for me today, the quote you used from Mevlana about leadership.
All right.
Isn't it?
So when I first came to Turkey and first met Riza, I was talking about what we in the West could learn from Turkey about leadership. And I went right through the writings of some of the great Sufi poets, including Mevlana, Jalaluddin Rumi. Some of you know the poetry of Rumi. And I looked at, well, what did Rumi in the 13th century, 12th century, have to say about leadership? And I found this one line, which was a jewel. Leadership is a poison unless you have the antidote in your heart. And one of the things about this book is we have written it so it's a journey and experience. It has a lot of poetry. It has a lot of experiential exercises that you can go off and do. It's trying to talk to not people's just left hemisphere, not just their right hemisphere, not just their limbic, but their whole being. And the book is much about creating an experience as it is about words.
Excellent. Eve?
Well, I was going to say, and learning from experiences absolutely from around the world, hearing Indigenous wisdom and understanding it. But I also wanted to pick up on something else you said, Riza, because you could say why climate and ecological consciousness. Actually, if, as Peter said, it's based around this eco-phase cycle, and right at the heart sits environmental, social, and economic responsibility, because they are interconnected. You can't separate them out, and to try to do so is wrong. So I don't think I need to say more than that, do I?
But I'd like to ask you, maybe the same to you, Peter. What role supervision is playing in this?
Well, before I start, then hand to Eve, because Eve and I think met many years ago, and we met through supervision when Eve was still working in the BBC. And I say now, like, to work with a team, you need the minimum of a 2+1 team. Or to work systemically with an organization, you need 2 people at least involved directly. So we've got multiple perspectives and teamwork in us, plus someone supervising. Because you could never see a whole system, because as soon as you see a system, you're part of the system you're seeing, right? So to actually work systemically, you need to be operating multiple perspectives. You need bifocal views. You need different perspectives working together, and you can't do that alone. And so systemic work is always a team sport. Yeah, it is about, you can't be saying to the team, you need to be collaborative. We're not learning to be, as came up today, collaborative as coaches. Yeah. It's amazing how individualistic a lot of us in the coaching profession are. And that's one of the reasons I take my hat off to the work that Eve's done, both in leading the Global Supervisors Network as a community of practice and a community of learning, and then going on and with Josie and Alison to run the Climate Coaching Alliance as a non-commercial, nobody paying community, not just a practice, but a community of inquiry that's constantly pushing forward the boundaries of what we're doing. Eve?
Well, you talked about supervision, and actually, Peter said bifocal views. Actually, until very recently, I had varifocal lenses, and but I had cataracts, so I had to have them out. So now I don't have any glasses at all, but varifocal lenses. This idea of being able to see many different things at the same time. It's in supervision, as in coaching. And by the way, we do have a copy of our book, Systemic Coaching. We just don't have the latest one. But supervision, I think it's about the questions we ask and the inquiry we open up. So sometimes the contracting is a place, who are the stakeholders? Just asking some of those really simple questions. Who are the stakeholders? Who are we serving? Who are the stakeholders whose voices need to be in this room? And then particularly in supervision, and we probably don't talk a lot about how you evaluate supervision, but some of the questions, I have benefited from supervision, and this is an example. You can ask that as a question, as a supervisee. But what about my clients have benefited from my supervision, and here's an example. And then you can say, my stakeholders have benefited from supervision, and here are some examples. And this is how I integrate the learning I get from supervision into practice. And I think it's doing things like that that really bring the learning through. And so for me, Peter's mentioned it, bringing the stakeholders in different ways. And of course, you're going to have such fun, particularly in group supervision, because when we wrote the book, Alison, who sadly died, and I decided we'd run an experiential group of supervision, which was great because it didn't matter if it didn't work, because we just invited people to come and play with us. And actually that was liberating for them as well as us. And so we played with things. And so one of the stories is about a turtle, which I can't possibly tell in a short amount of time. But the point was, people played different roles within the system. And so you had someone speaking for different parts of the system, which you can do in groups. And one of them happened to speak for a turtle, which is where the turtle story comes from. So I think there are lots of ways you can play with this. And that's what I'd encourage, playing.
Riza was with me on the first supervision training we did in Turkey some years back. And by the way, the EMCC, I think the first ever talk on coaching supervision at EMCC was Zurich 2005, which I gave on the 7-9 model. But one of the things I constantly say is supervision is not done by the supervisor. Yeah. And the supervisee isn't the client. Supervision is a partnership between supervisor and supervisee, shoulder to shoulder, facing the generous challenges that our clients bring us, that our coachees bring us, right? So that the agenda for supervision is set by the work, not by the supervisor or the supervisor, right? Correct. And if you like, and I liked what you said, Eve, the work does the supervision. You know, our job is to be at the learning edge together, really learning from what life is trying to help us learn next. It's not an exchange of pre-cooked wisdom.
And I think
one of the reasons, I'm sorry, so one of the reasons why I really want to take this conversation from the school, from here, is the fact that I should add that, we really feel happy in a way to bring coaching in the core of the business education. Because, I'm relatively an outsider in the coaching because I've been a banker. So you see, nobody's perfect. So I did 30 years in the dark side, whatever. But the issue, I think coaching started a lot, benefiting from psychology. But I think it's time also for coaching to also benefit from the systems like the business.
Yeah.
So even today, we have witnessed so much like cognitive, so much left brain, so much should, do, must, the best, blah, blah, the way. There's so much the business world can learn, especially the business education world can learn from coaching. So that's why this hand in hand, I see accredited programs in the business schools. I think that's a very good news because those graduates here, they run the world, they run their company, they manage they can, like this, where the coaches were, when the bank's burning, when the climate is, but at the end of the day, all those MBA graduates are the one as well in the system.
So let me mention, we have a Scholars in Residence program through the Renewal Foundation. And Professor Salome Van Coller was from Stellenbosch University, was our first scholar in residence. And one of the projects, so they come, they live where I live near Bath, they work on a major project, it's shifting human consciousness. And she's gone back to create joint work between the Stellenbosch Department of Sustainability, the MBA and the coaches.
You see?
Because what I worry about is business schools, and even I worked with several. I was at Henley Business School, and the coaching is, it's a department on the side, right? It brings in nice revenue for the business school, which brings in nice revenue for the university. But actually, what worries me is the coaching sector then it becomes a side issue, not at the heart of the MBA. And so with this work, what we're looking at is how does somebody from the sustainability masters, the MBA and the coaching masters, do a joint real life organizational transformation, which is using the skills of all of them to create ecological and organizational change.
Exactly.
And that's why I think I was talking to people at IESE here. It's like we need to move away from leader education to collective leadership change. We need to move away from case study education to future challenge-based management and leadership learning.
For example, as we have seen today, from diversity, which is an action plan, box ticking exercise, to inclusion, which is a more kind of coaching topic to create this inclusive feeling. And touching about inclusion, I was so curious and I do some work there. 2 weeks ago, I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, attending the International Mentoring Conference with Nora hosting us. And we had this conversation linked to inclusion. A part of the inclusion is being respected, isn't it? To have the respect. And the definition of respect is changing from culture to culture, from generation to generation. Even in the same family, the definition of respect from the elderly to the youth changes a lot. So even though we are all looking for to receive some respect or to be respected.
But let me take this one step further. Because it came up today with a question about diversity, and there was a panel. And I thought, there was a lot of good contributions, but they were still looking at diversity and inclusion at the individualistic level. And when you talk about respect, you see, I think we've got to get beyond just, yes, we have to respect the individual, but we have to respect the world that individual is speaking on behalf of.
Exactly.
And the bit of diversity that Eve and I talk about in systemic coaching, as well as in the new book, is what are the different stakeholders that we are carrying in with us? Because a lot of conflict in teams is because the HR manager is carrying the needs of the employees, the sales manager the needs of the customer, the finance manager the needs of the investor. And actually we need to collectively own and respect all those worlds, because our job as a leadership team is to find how do we create a win-win-win-win-win-win right around that whole cycle. Yeah, is to orchestrate the ecosystem synergy, right? Not argue about, do we get more profits for the investors or better pay for the employees or cheaper prices for the customers? Yeah,
exactly. Eve, you were, I think,
unmuted.
No, I was particularly interested. There are some wonderful comments in the chat box, and I was just thinking it would be nice to bring in some voices.
Please tell us. We are on such a small screen.
We can't see them.
Well, that's fine. Well, I just wondered.
Hi, thank you. It's so nice to see you, Eve, here. Well, I just joined 10 minutes ago. I'm so excited. I was a few days before coming into the different sessions, because when I found out a few weeks ago about the many associations, coaching associations that signed this joint statement to against climate change, meaning for climate action, I found it wonderful. I didn't know that was happening, and so I have been since then very curious to see what is going on. My perspective is from the sustainability mindset. That I'm an academic for the last 17 years. I was a coach before, but in the last 70 years, I went into academia. And the focus of my research is the sustainability mindset, because I, coming from coaching, was interested why certain leaders were spontaneously interested in making their organization more beneficial for the community or the environment. And no one asked them to do so, and why did they do it? So I was very curious, and I said, maybe if there is something there that we could intentionally do, support others that don't have these moments. Well, I didn't know if it was what kind of experience it was that triggered it, because I studied those that were business as usual, very traditional business leaders that shifted. So what I came up was actually a number of aspects that they had in common, and it is not very far away from what coaches always pay attention. They had an holistic approach to their business. At some point, they started to ask themselves, so what is my purpose anyway? Why am I in this role, given this authority? Mostly they were CEOs or founders, so they were very much at the top. But they were asking, so why do I have all this power? What am I doing? What will my grandkids tell me? What questions will they be asking me? So they started to ask these questions. And also they connected information about what was available, the environment, things like that, but with feelings. It was not just data. When they started to say, oh my God, and how am I part of this? it became personal. And that was so powerful. That was like what you call it, disorienting dilemma. Huh? And they started, I need to do something. I cannot be the only one saying like that. And so they went on and tried to bring about change in their organizations. So I connected in the chat with this story about the turtle, because I adopted an exercise from Joanna Macy's, who you may know. And she has this wonderful exercise of the 3 masks. So I created 3 masks, and one mask represents our ancestors. The other mask represents the future generations. And the third mask, the non-human beings. And so when we are doing a workshop, particularly with corporations, which are, and people in corporate have their mind very much into let's get things, let's do things. So I say, okay, this is the mask of this represents it. And I just place them on a chair, on a shelf in the room. And during a session, when something comes up where they are very anchored, and this is how we do business, we cannot lose and we cannot look at the long term because this and that, and all this, how will I leave people unemployed if I become sustainable? And I said, okay, let's pause, just take a moment, 1 minute in silence, and look at each of the masks, what voices are coming. And it is so powerful. I don't even have to say anything, because everything, they will come with all the words after that. I think this being in another being's voice is so powerful. And I love the story of the turtle.
So this we have to do. Thank you so much for what you shared. We have to do this not just with team coaching, but with individual coaching. And I always say, don't just have 2 chairs in an individual coaching group. You need at least 6 or 7, so we can bring in the more than human, the grandchildren, the customers, the employee. We can bring in all those different voices, even if we're just doing individual coaching.
And the problem, or what makes me kind of sad, is coaches, when we come together, we speak the same language. And we know it works. It's amazing, isn't it? But once we are outside of our circles, even though our circles are getting bigger and bigger, I know, but still people come up with very, outdated approach to the business. So that's why our presence in the business schools, I believe this is hope. This is really hope for the future. And that's why conscious, climate conscious, whatever conscious, coaches and coach training will make a difference.
So let's be careful that we don't also get evangelical.
Sure.
And about what we can bring to the business school. I think it's really important that every coach training invites onto the faculty CEOs who don't employ coaches to come and talk to the coaches about why they don't. I think it's important that we get different business people on the coach training as much as we get coaches working on the leadership and MBA programs.
Correct. I agree.
And so that together we arrive at the edge where we don't yet know how to partner.
Just maybe a bit of information, as you may know, we have now we gave grant for research, and we made a competition, and there are 7 projects that have been started. 2 of them, I think, or 3 of them are linked to coaching and leadership. How coaching approach is really, we believe, we see there are anecdotal data, there's research, but we need more research to show that coaching works in the leadership positions. So more research to come. One of the research is interesting is about neuroscience, and the other one, 2 of them are about women emancipation, the glass ceilings and everything. And the last one is about mentoring in the startups. How those entrepreneurs, how they benefit from the mentoring or not. What are the barriers in the journey? So I think more research we do hand in hand with the business world, with the stakeholders, I'm sure we will be able to be more relevant to the bigger questions in the world. What would you say?
And well, it's interesting. Even I, as part of doing the ecological and climate conscious coaching book, did, with the help of Coach Rising and another organization, we did some research on coaches and the sustainability mindset, ecology. And what was interesting, what came out of that, there's a number of coaches who said, we had, how many hundred did we have, Eve, in the research? With the two different research questionnaires?
About 400, at least, 400 at least, I can't remember, yeah.
And it was from right around the world. And what we discovered very powerfully was that many coaches really wanted, in their own lives, were doing a hell of a lot around recycling, and offsetting, and then they were doing their coaching, and they didn't know how to bring the two together. Mm-hmm. And what they were saying is, but how do we bring the ecology in? So in the book, we address this quite profoundly, which is to say, well, actually, we don't have to bring the ecology in. The ecology is already in the coaching. As I sometimes provocatively say, if your coaches eat and they breathe, the ecology is already in the coaching room. You're just not paying attention to it.
And but it's as if there are some subjects that, first of all, I go back to what Riza said. It's as if we are non-directive, and that's right. And I don't believe we are. But it's like there are some subjects that are acceptable to talk about and to talk about openly, and then there are other subjects which seem not to be okay to talk about. So we talked to somebody about how you're going to stay in profit, how you're going to get more profits, business as usual. But we wouldn't say how you're going to make sure you still have staff in 20 years' time when their idea of what a good employer is may well be changing. Let's look at the evidence. So I think there's different ways of bringing things in. And talking about bringing in, is it possible to invite someone to ask a question? Is that all right, Riza?
Of course, of course.
I would love to ask Esther you've actually put in 2 contributions now, but you had a question, or you can just say your contribution, whichever you prefer.
Contribution is I'm confused. And what I'm confused about is the diversity of opinions, feelings, emotions, and visions of individuals, of cultures, of societies, of coaching, all of them at the same time, and who's to say which is the most virtuous and best way of doing this. And once you've coached these teams and teams of teams, etc., who's to say how to implement it in the most optimal level? We are too different. This is too chaotic. It's a VUCA problem, and I'm not sure it has a solution. We're doing our best, but we're not getting there.
But perhaps we have to start from the fact that none of us have the answer, but together we can find the answer.
Or maybe we can create clarity. An answer could be different for different people in different contexts.
Well, yes and no, I think. I think if we start from none of us have the answer, not that we can find the answer, but we can find together what the wider world is asking from us. So that we're not just, you see, I think it's a false assumption that human beings can solve the climate crisis. I don't think we can. I think through collaboration, we can start by saying, none of us can do this alone. None of us have the answer. And even the totality of human beings doesn't have the answer. We have to partner with the more than human world to discover the way forward. Yeah. The wider system always knows more than any of us or any species does. And this is why Robin Wall-Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, is such a beautiful book. We quote it a lot in our book because she is a professor of botany. So she's a very highly respected academic of botany on one hand, and yet she also has spent her life reclaiming her native, indigenous, Native American tradition. And she's also writes about bringing up her 2 daughters. And she brings the learning from those 3 worlds together. And it's like, we can't do it with our heads. We can't do it with our heads, body, and heart alone. We can't do it just through collaboration, human collaboration. We have to collaborate beyond the human species as well as across it.
I totally agree. You know, I don't really say too much, but my very first book that I published 12 years ago was about sustainability,
Right.
carbon markets, whatever, so from the financial angle. And at that time, what I discovered, everybody wants to sustain their way of life. So then it becomes unsustainable. So the solution maybe from the Eastern cultures come into play, and this is harmony. Exactly what you said, like 3 different words, bringing them together to create a harmony to way forward. And that also requires to live in harmony with ourselves. So once you live in harmony with yourself, with your close surroundings, then you're really disconnected from the rest. So it's all hand in hand. I like your analogy today, like this how do you call it, the Russian dolls?
Russian dolls. So we take this lovely concept, and I often talk about how the American and Western world, we talk about win-win. The Japanese never do. They always talk win-win-win.
Yeah.
And Gregory Bateson, who said, the unit of survival is never the species, right? The unit of survival is never the individual or the team or the organization or the country. The unit of survival is always a species in dynamic co-creation with its ecological niche. The unit of sustainability is not humanity, right? The unit of sustainability is any species and its ecosystem. So any species that destroys its ecosystem destroys itself.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of, do we focus on our needs or the ecology's needs? They are the same. We and the ecology are one cycle, which is inseparable.
That's what I call harmony. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So sustainability mustn't be located in a species or a part of the world. It has to be the interplay between any part of the world and the wider system that it depends upon and that depends upon it.
Because if you don't bring the systemic view, it becomes a lobby game.
Yes.
Whose way of life will sustain? Then comes coaching, of course, into play. So Eve?
I was just going to say, Isabel has put in a quote from Paul Polman's book, I imagine Net Positive. When corporations don't pay attention to sustainability, they're financing their own demise. And then I'm going to sneak in a quote, one of the quotes from Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, which is it's in the section, What is our place in relation to Earth? In native ways of knowing, human people are often referred to as the younger brothers of creation. We say that humans have the least experience with how to live and thus the most to learn. We must look to our teachers among the other species for guidance. Their wisdom is apparent in the way that they live. They teach us by example. They've been on the earth far longer than we have been and have had time to figure things out.
Thank you.
And Eve, I was in Grand Canyon last week. So when you see these 2 billion years of whatever, so amazing perspective. So you really put yourself in a totally different way of life than being in the room with your coachee and believing that you coach each other or mentoring, contextual wisdom. So it's all kind of brings many different perspectives into play. Is there any other comment or question, Eve? So you're doing a great job. If
yes,
you can't see
Peter,
anything from here.
And Luca
Peter,
would like to speak.
Can I?
Yes, do.
Yes. Peter, you mentioned the antidote for leadership. Can you expand the concept of antidote?
The antidote that you will find in your heart. What is this antidote?
It is where we realize, Luca, thank you, Lovely to see you on the screen. Grazie, signor. When we realize that actually, when we come into our heart, it's just not our heart. Our heart is where we are connected with the heartbeat of the world. Yeah. So the antidote actually is to discover where the I, not this I, but I, stops being the punctuation of our experience, and where we are connected to that which flows through us and is much greater than we are.
It's a very deep concept, very deep concept. The antidote you find in your heart. I need to reflect on that. Yeah. Thank you, Luca. Thank you. Any other comment? Any other questions?
Isabel has said coaches are in a privileged position to be accelerators of change to a more holistic leadership, particularly in this polarized world. I don't think any of us would disagree with that, but sometimes I suppose the challenge we think we have is how. And I suppose one thing we haven't mentioned is, for some of us, that might need courage. It might need being prepared to say things that may be uncomfortable, but always to do it with a loving heart. And I think, earlier Esther was talking about how we need to have an open heart, an open soul, an open mind. We need to do it with openness and love, and always in dialogue and non-judgment.
Yeah. In fact, that was one of the topics on Monday when we had the opening panel, thorny issues. There are so many thorny issues that coaches used to avoid talking about, but there's no way to avoid them. One of the panelists he mentioned that his coach asked him, how is it to be black? Because the gentleman was the manager of a team of black people, and he wanted to understand from his coach, who is a colored person, to get the perspective. So, that's okay, maybe not okay. For all of us, there are some issues we are prepared to talk, and we are not prepared to talk.
So one of the questions I try and bring into every coaching relationship is, so what are you and I going to regret not having addressed in this very precious time we have together? In 10 years from now, what are we going to look back and regret that we did not have the courage to talk about and to do? And that shifts the level of the coaching.
It shifts the levels of the marriage as well. So I would ask this question to my wife. So yeah, very strong. I see a hand. Noel? We got to be aware of time as well. So we said 1 hour, so we got to kind of finish in 10 minutes time. So Noel?
Hi everyone. Just a quick one. This conversation reminds me of when I had recently on equi-coaching with non-human, so coaching with horses. So involving non-human, and there was this thing about leadership and how there's like graduation in leadership from influent and benevolent into insistent, assertive, dominant, and abusive. And that often case, we look at more of the domineering, abusive leadership, whereas the horse is the lowest on this with influence, and that when we can gain that, and I think with ecology, that's what needs to happen. It needs to be nudged into doing. So I saw that this idea of working with non-human wisdom there was extremely interesting, and the quote by Eve made me think of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lovely.
It's again going back to our instincts, what makes us human. I think it was Brené Brown, like we always say human are the thinking species. Actually, we are feeling species. From time to time we think, not always. Bringing back the feeling, yeah.
Well, what makes us earth creatures?
Yeah, exactly.
The horses can help us rediscover our groundedness as earth creatures.
Yeah. So let's say one or two more comments, and then let's wrap it up. Is there anything that we're missing there? Yeah, tell me.
Yes, Esther's asked a question. How do we coach those who don't want to be coached systemically, who are in leadership positions and who have non-virtuous motives? I mean, in a way, I'm sure Peter and Riza will carry on, but I think for me, I just find it hard not to coach systemically, because when we start having the conversation, I just ask questions like, what's this about for you? Who do you do this for? What's important to you? It's just building up a picture of the stakeholders. So in that sense, I think the work is systemic anyway. Is there anything else you want to say, Esther, before we go to Riza and Peter? Is there anything you'd like to add? Maybe you've had a particular experience that you wanted to share? No.
How do we better the world full of Hitlers and coach them?
Say again, please.
I couldn't quite catch
We
it.
couldn't hear from here.
How do we make a better world with people like the Hitlers, who are difficult to coach, who nobody wants to coach, individually and in teams, because they're in leadership positions. There's good and bad.
I mean, you're right, Esther. I'll let Riza and Peter handle that. But I do think there are a few people, and it used to be a question, I don't know whether everyone else did this, I'm a supervisor, and you'd say, how Donald Trump's organization on the phone, his team on the phone, they want you to coach him, what do you say? There is something about our instant reaction, isn't there? And then maybe there are some people who are uncoachable. But I remember it was a case that happened really recently for me as a supervisor, when someone who is also a supervisor brought a case that had happened to her with a coach who she believed had demonstrated racism. And she just didn't know how to handle it because she was so angry. And one of the things we talked about is, how do we stay in a place that is non-judgmental? How do we stay in a place that allows dialogue to continue? How do we stay in a place that retains the container and the safety, in this case for the coach, so they were then able to explore that in a way that as it happened allowed them to really shift their thinking. But it was only done by retaining what we're so good at, the safety, the containment, the non-judgment. Sometimes I think it's really hard to do that. Anyway, I won't say any more. I'll let Riza and Peter jump in.
So, Eve days be evolved. I'm always pushing the boundaries. And one of them is to say, I think there's such a thing as an uncoachable coachee. Just a mode of engagement we have not yet found. And I think go on to say that may or may not be true, but I believe it's the attitude we should start from. Because one of the things I try and teach teams and organizations is never locate the difficulty or the problem in a person or a part of the system. Always locate it in a connection. And in supervision, I work with people to say, I'm surprised how quickly we as coaches blame and put responsibility onto the coachee, rather than come to supervision with, we haven't yet found a way of engaging this person. Because that then takes us to a learning edge. And Eve and I both work with this concept of wide-angled empathy. How do we have empathy not just for the coachee in the room, but everyone in the story?
Exactly.
And that just keeps us constantly going to our edge of can we see everyone, Trump, Hitler, whoever, and it's different for different people.
Yeah.
And see them as people who are doing the best they know how, right? Because they haven't had the privilege of people who can hold them and help them see a wider perspective. Because all of them are ultimately self-destructive. That they're not winning, right? They are people in need of help.
And coaches also should give up seeking for aha moments or seeking for success or seeking for their usefulness in the system, but believe in the harmony with their, the coaching relationship and to serve the work.
I just this last thought, which is, for me, the quality of coaching is not to do with the feedback from the coachee. It's to do with what percentage of the time have we spent at the learning edge where the coachee doesn't have the answer, we don't have the answer, but we are both clear that life is requiring an answer. And the more time we can spend at that space with humility, really trying to learn what is life trying to teach us, and being on life's agenda, not the coachee's agenda, not our agenda, but the constant lessons that life brings us all.
And this is actually true for mentoring as well.
Yeah.
Because think about pandemics. Who has contextual wisdom how to survive a pandemic? Lockdowns, everything. So staying in the unknown comfortably, looking for what the world is seeking for an answer from us.
And the pandemic, pandemic, the question is, have we as humanity learned the lesson that the generous lesson that the pandemic was asking us to learn about how we are all interconnected?
Correct.
Have we in our human consciousness really taken the lesson that life has given us?
And how fast we're going back to polarized words anyway. So Eve, last word, because we have like 2 minutes, 3 minutes left, and we have to, empty this room. So it's like until 30 that we're in this room.
No, I just wanted to emphasize the word that Peter said, I think, is to retain our humility, because actually we all have areas. I have things I'm not proud of. I have attitudes I'm not proud of. There are things that I'm not conscious of that I will do wrong. I'm based on a whole load of assumptions. So there's something in all of us that we may not be proud of. So I think to retain our humility at all times. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. And thank you for those who've joined us and opened their questions and their sharing. Yeah, and it's great to be with Riza in Barcelona. And the thing about being in Barcelona is that the food and the wine keeps coming and coming. So the next time you see us on the video, you'll see Riza twice the size. You'll be catching up with me.
We should do that more often. We shouldn't wait for the next GPS, but we should, Peter, we should have such dialogue on an ongoing basis. So thank you very much.
And do join us at the book launch.
Of course.
Oh yes, 29th of November, free.
Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, organizers, our admin team, Denise, all accreditation team, and all of you, EQA providers, EIA holders, our community, for making it happen today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Riza, Peter, and Eve, and every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you.